Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order and welcome to the North Rose-Wolcott Board of Education meeting. We will begin our meeting tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A motion, please, to approve tonight's agenda. Linda and Casey. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Tonight we do have a presentation from our superintendent. Mr. Pullen, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Collier. So I'm going to start off and just kind of bring the board some information sharing. As you know, we've been talking a lot about ag tech and really trying to grow our capacity with respect to our programs to fill a void within our curriculum, but also to fill a void within the workforce development. So I want to start by giving a special thanks to Sherry Lightall, who's the director of New York State Agricultural Education Outreach with Cornell. Much of what I'm going to share with you, she provided to our team, and I also want to give Fred Prince a big acknowledgement because when we started to pursue this path, you know, Fred's taken the lead on this charge, and he's been networking with several professionals and several organizations to try and find us somebody to bring to the table at North Rose-Wolcott. So there are other people to thank as well, but for our purposes tonight, you know, I just want to say special thanks to Sherry and to Fred. So really when we talk about, you know, where is New York with agriculture education, and I apologize for my misspeak there. There's a map right there between all the area programs and all the FFA programs that are out there in existence right now. And I think if you were to look here in the middle where our state is, or our community is, you start to see that there's a noticeable gap in program there, which is mind-blowing to me considering how important agriculture is to our entire community and what it does for our county, for our region, for our state, and for our country. So that's really telling sign right there in my opinion. Everything we do, you know, goes back to our strategic action plan, but the one part that I really want to point out for folks is when it comes down to our portrait of a graduate, we really need to start thinking about different pathways and better opportunities for students that don't want to fall into a program track that's just limited by what we currently offer. So one of the things that I want to highlight for us and for our community is, you know, the agriculture is the largest employer in the United States according to the data, right? Like 23 million jobs there, 17% of our civilian workforce. And so when you think about our community in particular, there are so many apple growers and so many different industries that center on fruit. You know, you take a look at the girls down here in the bottom left, that's a typical homecoming picture from the Highland cows that are neighbors to us. And then you think of Merrill Farms and so many other opportunities within our local community that really we need to think about career and technical education endorsements, going back to the portrait of a graduate, work-based learning opportunities and how to stimulate the local economy, but also to give people an opportunity to see the fruits of their labor, no pun intended, come right back to the local workforce, and then to develop next generation of leaders and kids with critical thinking skills and the essential skills to be productive, tax-paying members of our society. So those are three big pushes for the why. Here's some of the global trends, you know, and again, it's just information sharing, and I'll go through the roadmap with you as well. But if you start to look at that, you start to see just how advanced agriculture is and just how important those essential skills that I mentioned previously are to our workforce and our development. When we talk about the main issues with agriculture labor shortage, we talk about the people of baby boomers that are starting to retire, the movement of rural populations out of our community, the growth in and reliance on technology, and this industry, much like many others, was impacted by the global pandemic. So there's some data, again, that comes to us from the Department of Labor, just things to be aware of at this point in time. And then when you look at the segments and the populations and you start to see, the open positions, it's very telling that this is a need, not just locally, but across our state and nationally. So by the year 2050, I think that this staggering to me, that, our population's going to require 100% more food than we currently have right now, and that 70% of this needs to come from, better efficiency or better technology and improved efficiency with growing our products. And then there's a picture to kind of show you the population growth, and then up in the right-hand corner is the piece that I really think we have to capitalize on. The agriculture education is critical to ensure and cultivate our diverse student interest in our food systems. And then here's another piece when you start to think about the various ways that we can put our children on a pathway to success. Ag-business systems, animal systems, the biotechnology systems, all the things that are listed up here that really talk about, some critically important professions, but also some pretty high intensity courses that really are going to cultivate student interest and then grow their capacity based purely on relevance. So again, just information sharing tonight. Where do we go from here? Honestly, I believe that the next step would be for us to develop a survey and survey our students to just see if the interest is there. I have a feeling that it's going to be. We would come back to the Board of Education, similar with other course or program proposals. We'd look for you to do a formal acceptance of our proposal. We need the student data to kind of drive that. Actively and formally recruit teacher candidates. You've seen in my Friday updates to you all that we've had informal conversations with a few staff members. We've been out having social conversations to try and network with different agencies to bring people in. Fred's working currently with a potential candidate about coming out, doing a community-based site visit. We're pretty optimistic that once that candidate comes out and sees our community, understands the benefits of being here, that's going to benefit our process, because I do believe the candidate will see the benefits of North Rose-Wolcott, how central we are to the agriculture community and how close in proximity we are to Cornell, and the fact that you could start something like a blank canvas and then really cultivate and grow it. We need to secure the teacher candidate, obviously, once that becomes formalized, and then identify curricular and material needs, and then create a timeline and an implementation plan. My feeling is right now, on an informal basis, there's a lot we can do with Cornell Cooperative Extension. There's an agricultural literacy week coming up in March. That's something that I'm going to encourage our staff to get involved with. There's an actual conference that Mrs. DeWispalier recommended to us. We've encouraged people from all levels of our organization to attend, to go out and solicit background information, to garner their interest and gain support for their awareness of what it might mean at the elementary level, what it might mean at the middle school level, and what a 9 through 12 program would look like. Ultimately, success for me would be that we would implement this program. It would be a 9 through 12 credit bearing program with monthly activities at both the elementary and middle school level. And ultimately, once we got our ag tech program up and running, we would try to file for a chapter of FFA, and we can't do that until we actually have an ag tech program in tow. But that's something that's really, I believe, a step in the right direction because it's going to reach so many more students. So I know it's just information sharing, but I'm happy to take any questions you may have at this point in time. Yes?
Not a question, but a comment, because I know that Cornell also has a lot of grants that they do for education, which should be, I mean, we're so close. It should help us in that way.
Yeah, Sherry talked with us a little bit during our initial conversation, and it's first come, first serve, unfortunately. So, we said we would apply for anything we possibly can. But you're right. I think the proximity certainly helps, and ongoing continuing contact also helps. And then having Cornell Cooperative, which is an entirely separate entity, being in our county and working with them on that component also helps. So I think that there's a lot of positives with this. Okay. The next piece is something that I know this time of year, you and myself and many of my colleagues get asked this question often. So I figured we might as well kind of put it out in the open, because I do believe it's something that you guys field a lot of questions about. You get a lot of feedback, and I don't think people quite understand all that goes into the winter protocols. So, the number one question that seems to be hitting a lot of us lately is, why are we in school when others around us may delay or close? Go back to our core principle. Our primary focus has been and will always be teaching and learning. That at times means that we're going to have academics take place during inclement weather. And I would also point out that at times it means that we take and have classes in the spring and summer or late fall when it's still warm and not necessarily called out like they did for the heat index bill. But during the winter time, we have to make decisions on getting students here. So during those times when students are at school, they can be certain that they're warm, they're fed, they're taught, they're supervised, and that they're cared for. So going into the specifics about protocols and getting students to school, I think it's important for people in the community to know that typically begins about 4 a.m. So, and it's a little bit of a misnomer there, because usually on a night when we're forecasting snow, I'm probably up at 1, I'm probably up at 3, we're up for good at 4, and then our conversations start. The first thing in the morning, we kind of keep an eye on the temperature and the wind chill factor. And I think it's important for people to understand that typically, between -15 and -25, that's the guideline that you're using from both state ed and the Department of Health to say those are dangerous levels. You don't want students standing out at a bus stop due to risk of frostbite. The next thing is, usually by about 4:15 or 4:20, we're starting to have our first conversations with the director of transportation and then the highway superintendents. Very basic questions. What's it look like? Can they keep up with the snowfall? And then what's the blowing and drifting piece, right? Because the wind obviously is a factor. Can we see our children waiting for the bus? That, like I said, about 4:15 or 4:20, the first communications start to go out. When it comes down to it, almost simultaneously, we're having a conversation with our director of maintenance and operations to talk about our facility readiness. Is the building going to be warm when the students come in? Our maintenance mechanic, Mr. O'Neill, usually on site between 2 and 4 a.m. in the morning. And I don't think people realize he's walking the building before he goes out and jumps in the dump truck to plow and salt. But he's checking the temperature in the buildings physically on site while Mr. Sebastiano's checking it on the computer. Again, almost simultaneously with the director of transportation. Jeremy and I are having a conversation to ensure the guys on grounds can keep up with keeping the parking lots cleaned and salted, and are they going to be okay for arrival. And then lastly, it's kind of an ongoing process. We're continuing to monitor the forecast, whether it's in telecast, weather underground, Google weather, weather.com, or occasionally my mother checking in to make sure I know what the forecast is going to be for next week. We're listening to her. So that's something that's really important for people to keep in mind.
Mike, what time do the earliest our drivers actually leave school to start their runs?
They leave about 6:15. Wow. The first driver is on site at 5 o'clock. So as part of like the decision making, so keep in mind from 4 to 5, we've got a bunch of contacts going out. And usually, I put usually there, but I will tell you it's almost certain by 5 o'clock because we have so many commuters. So we've said to staff when we hire them, they're worried about the 104 corridor. And I say to them all the time, don't worry. Usually we're making a decision by 5 a.m. because I don't want you traveling either. But if I get good information, which I do because our highway superintendents are phenomenal, I'm making a call at 5 a.m. And I'm going with that at that point in time because 5 a.m. my first driver shows up. 6 a.m. the rest of the drivers show up. 6 a.m. my cook managers are on site getting breakfast prepared. So it's really a matter of we have to make decisions with the information you have at that moment in time. And you're doing that because you're making sure that people are safe and cared for. Because I never want to put anyone at risk. Then the communication starts to go out via Parent Square, the website, social media, broadcast media, and TV and radio. So once a decision's made, typically after that, we start to field the criticisms. So I'm giving you the G-rated version. There's a couple that, Fred advised me not to put up there because they're probably not school appropriate. But there's a piece where you start to go through the typical questions. Why did you make my child go to school in this weather? You put our children's safety at risk. You're sitting there worried about some state aid more than my child's life. You have a bank of snow days, why don't you use them? You're more concerned with your paycheck than keeping my child safe. You put inexperienced drivers in harm's way. I want my child in school as much as possible. Thank you for staying open. So I include that in there. And again, that's just a sampling of what it is. But I think it's important to tell people, just like with any other experience, if they feel it's an unsafe condition for their child, they always reserve the right to keep their child home. They do that when it comes to family trips. They do it when it comes to special events. They do it when it's, any other time that benefits them. And I would encourage them to use that same tactic. If you don't feel comfortable sending your child to school, don't do it. I, as a parent, when my children were in school, and as an administrator, my children commuted in, I would tell them, you're staying home today. You stay home, enjoy the snow day, because as a parent, I'm driving them, but I did not feel comfortable. Or when they became old enough to drive, stay home. I don't feel comfortable with you driving, but it is what it is. So we make decisions with the information we have, and living along the lake shore, that weather pattern can change in a moment's notice. So from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. might be clear, and at 6:05 the skies may open up and start dumping a ton of snow. So some of the things that I want you all to consider is, if you're asking me to revise our protocol, what the timing of the decision would be. Right? So I want you to think about that, and then we have a little discussion at the end to see if you're in favor of it. I also want you to understand there are no snow days built into our calendar. There's a minimum number of days that we have, and there are times where I come to the board and say we have not used any snow days, or we haven't used any days at all. We're at the minimum threshold, And then can you adjust the calendar and we keep it at the minimum threshold and it benefits our kids later in the year? If not, I think we need to start thinking about eliminating April break. The one part people have to remember is because if I get into it and I have 182 student days on the calendar and I need minimally 180, once I get beyond that, which has happened in the past, you will be coming to school in April. And as one administrator shared with me earlier, it was a nightmare because you create haves and have-nots. And you have people that make financial commitments long in advance of April that have to ultimately change plans, and then there's a hindrance there. The other piece that I know is extremely popular, because we learned this during COVID, people like remote instruction. I'm saying that facetiously, obviously, but we could go back, because one of the first public sessions I had, I was asked very clearly my opinion on snow days. And I said, personally, I'm in favor of snow days. I actually like a big breakfast on a day where everybody can stay home. And I used to actually enjoy making that for my children. So we could go back and we could change and we could work on our plans and we could make remote instruction the norm on days when we have snow days. That's happened in some of our neighboring districts. I don't know that it's a popular decision. I've never surveyed anybody. But lastly, the piece that I would say is contractually, if we make changes, we're going to have to go back to the bargaining units because there are contractual considerations that we would have to employ. So I'm trying to share that with you because I know you're all getting a ton of feedback on this lately, whether it's in the community, whether you're in the stands at a sporting event, or, you know, wherever it may be. But I know it was asked to consider the protocols, so I'm open for any discussions that you may have at this point in time or any feedback you want to give me with regards to how we handle it. And I will say, in the 6 years that I've been in from 2020 till now, there have been 4 snow days. And I know for a fact that, you know, on those particular days, usually the superintendent's on campus. Sometimes we have meetings with construction, sometimes we have parent meetings, and sometimes it's just needed because there may be a pipe that bursts and you need to kind of come and see it and figure out how we're paying for it.
Anyone want to comment? Linda? Yeah.
I just think that the protocol you use now is pretty efficient. And it, you know, you certainly get a lot of sources of information, which you're not making blind decisions. Just a comment.
Anyone else? Travis?
I'll agree. I like the protocols that we have in place now. I mean, you've only got that short window to make that decision, and if the weather changes after that, we just kind of got to go with it at that point, and you'll make a decision if it keeps getting worse to release early.
Right. Well, and that's the part where it's constant information. So last week, I think we canceled after-school activities, but we knew that first thing in the morning because the forecast was saying whiteout conditions in the PM, and there were. And I failed to mention, typically I will call one of our contiguous districts and talk to that superintendent as well. So if I'm hearing from 2 highway superintendents, it's better to reach out to a neighboring school district superintendent and see what his highway people are saying as well. So that's a big thing for us because a matter of a couple miles, the pattern changes. And unfortunately, you're right. We've got to go with it when we make that decision because, as we said, there are people on site very early in the morning and they're already en route. So if I can call it by 5, I've got a few people that are on the road, and I'm trying to minimize the impact on people in general.
If school is closed, secretaries, everybody's home.
Everybody's home.
Okay. Buildings.
The essential workers are the only group that come in, and those tend to be maintenance and operations with respect to keeping the grounds cleared. You know, and there are times where we've made decisions to hold them off. A few years ago, extremely cold over the Christmas holiday. Like Christmas Eve was, you know, below zero wind chill. And, you know, we had a few people on standby, but a few of us did have to come in. So, but you try to keep the majority of your staff home.
Anyone else?
Do we ever run into issues where we can get the students here, but teachers or staff can't get here in time? And then if so, what do we do in those circumstances?
All hands on deck. I think that there are a number of people sitting around at the board table now that have told me stories about when they were snowed in, and the last students were picked up at 9 o'clock at night. I think that that's something that, again, last week many of our neighbors in Monroe County canceled school the night before, and the residual effect for several area schools was, well, there's parents that live in Monroe County that children go to school in Wayne County, or there are children that were canceled in Onondaga County that parents work in Wayne County. And so you did see some staff absences, but I do believe in times like that, most people come together and take care of our kids. And they'll share responsibility and change roles based on the nature of what it is that we're being asked to do at that time.
Those times when we couldn't get the kids home, though that's very, you know, maybe a couple of times, and when I was teaching, that was it. And in those times, those of us who lived nearby said to the teachers and staff who lived farther away, go home, we'll take over. And it was covered that way. I do recall times when kids would come in, and then during the day there's a blizzard. And the protocol in those days was, we're not going to take them home in the middle of a blizzard. We'll wait and see. And usually by bus dismissal time, things had calmed down, so that only once did I have to ride a bus because it was that bad. And I was riding with Joni Smolinski that day. Do you remember Joni, any of you? And she was just a wonderful person. And it took us a long time, because every time we let a child off a bus, we sat there and we watched that child. If that child couldn't get in the house, they came back and got on the bus. In those days, that's mostly protocol now for elementary, but in those days it wasn't. But we got through. You know, in a district as big as ours, and with the lake, it can be snowing a blizzard in Rose-Wolcott along through there, which gets it really bad, and the sun can be shining in Rose. So it's when those bands come in, you just never know who's going to get hit.
Yeah, Tuesday that was very telling here, like the southwest corner of our district, where the town of Rose, the town of Lyons, and the town of Gallon meet. Those routes over there were a lot of wind-blown snow drifts, and it iced over, so it made it challenging. But we are 124 square miles. There are 7 townships. There are various pockets that you encounter throughout the time to say it's good or it's bad, or at times like, hey, slow and steady. And again, to Travis's question or comment about people doing what they need to do, like I would tell you, all hands on deck means all hands on deck. So whether it's driving a payload or plowing with a pickup truck or serving lunches, we'll jump in and do what we need to do. And we've done that in the past. You know, I think that there's a component there where, again, I just want people to know I'm okay with fielding calls with people that are upset, but I would just remind them your parental rights are always there. You don't have to send them to school, but if there's a bus out there to pick them up and you want to send them, we're assuming it's safe. Some of the stuff that we face, criticism wise, or some of the stuff that comes to me directly is really pointed, and there are things, like I said, it's interesting because it's very much a personal attack. I won't compromise children or staff safety for anything, but I am forced to make a judgment call at times. And, we come to school 182, 186 days a year. We may have 15 to 20 of these questionable days, where it's snowing like heck in the morning, and then by 9 o'clock it's sunny and cold. We're already watching for Monday's forecast because of what they're calling for. We're prepping. Had my first conversation with maintenance guys about that today. So it's something that during the winter, it's a pretty long day, 4 a.m. until, 8, 9 o'clock. It can be a drag at times.
I would just like to say that I would never be in favor of remote instruction, mainly because not all of our students would be able to have that accessibility. And also, teaching and learning remotely is far different than learning in person. And the teacher would have no time to get those materials that a child would need to learn remotely because they were going to pass it out that day, I just think that would be a waste of time. That's my opinion, but
So I would just ask that at the board discussion portion, if that's something that you want us to consider, that you just kind of weigh in and let me know. Because again, I'm happy to answer calls. I'm happy to give people a rationale as to why. I'm not happy to sit there and endure personal attacks. I get it. It comes with a job, but I also think that there are a number of people who don't realize that this is where it starts at 4 a.m. and how very specific and how very intentional we are when it comes down to it. The other piece that I think it's worth pointing out is I do drive to work as well. So I understand the conditions, and I will tell you, last Friday, I felt like the commute from 6 a.m. to 7 was a lot different than it was on Thursday when many schools closed. And I also know that by 9 o'clock, 9:30 last Friday, the roads were clear. And our highway superintendents, I know I said this earlier, they're great. Typically on days like last week, Thursday and Friday, we stay in touch with them throughout the day. So if we get them here, we do assess. If it's going to get worse toward dismissal, we will go toward a different dismissal time. But they also know lunch and that evening rush. Those are two big times where you see plow activity increase.
right. No, I think I'm hearing stay the course. That's what I'm seeing. Thank you, Mr. Poland. Tina, is there any public access requested tonight? No one? Okay. Thank you. Policy Committee has given us a first read here. Policy Committee, would you like to take over here and talk to us about what you're recommending?
Deleting, that's what we're recommending. The chair's stuck. We've just made an effort to go through and try and get rid of policies that are more procedural, that we don't necessarily need as a policy. So that's what many of these are. Some of them are state education law anyway, so it feels like it's a redundancy. A couple of them have been revised. You know, they were kind of left over from a previous audit, so we wanted to make sure we updated those policies. Unless, does anyone have questions about a particular policy they want to discuss, or they're concerned that we're trying to delete?
I just want to say, I know that if it's something that's state ed law, we don't really need a policy.
Yeah.
So there's some
Can't
of them
change
here
that
that
anyways.
really,
I, the only one, I question, sometimes I think it's good to have a policy on our books that is, of course, state law, except that people don't have state law books at home, but they have access to our policy. And I'm on the one of gifts and grants and bequests. If someone was thinking about, gifts for teachers, their teacher or something, do you think people out there
We do the wrong number.
ought to know
'Cause I don't
what's
recognize
what's okay and what isn't, or do you just think it's this, or do you think the policy was more related to gifts of businesses to get jobs, to
Yeah, I was like, I need
get
to
the
pull it up.
board. What do you
I
think?
was like, I honestly, I have them all memorized. Yes, a big, thick book of them.
If I remember correctly, that one was one that was already stated in
It
another
seemed like it was
policy,
redundant,
and it
if
was
I'm
just
remembering.
redundant.
It's in a different
It is,
policy.
yes, if I remember.
Because it speaks of that we may accept gifts and donations. The Board of Education can recognize that gift giving is a practice. And some of it seemed,
So can I jump in support of
sure,
that?
certainly. I was like, it
So,
seemed like it was
This,
not necessary.
so every child loves to bring their teacher an apple or a gift like that. This is more of the formal stuff, and you can look in the resolutions that we've started to formalize that. And I know the board's been very intent on publicly recognizing gifts and donations. So I think
Yeah.
that that's what it is. There is the redundancy piece, but they also, they're correct in saying, just as the first read it. If you don't agree with it, then bring it back for comments. But I support that because we are doing a better job over the last couple of years of saying, recognize this donation for this cause, recognize this for this scholarship. And you have that example in your board resolution tonight where there are monetary contributions coming in for a scholarship fund. And I think that that was the board's intent, and I think the policy committee is following through with the board's intent.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm fine with that, then.
Okay.
And then the others are just that you've looked at these and reviewed them, and they stay on the books. Okay. So that's first read. We'll be voting on those at the next meeting. At this time, the board needs to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing a specific employees. So a motion, please, to go into executive session. Linda and Travis, any discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, we'll be back. And we are on page 2, number 5, the consent agenda. Motion, please, to approve the consent agenda. Tina and Leslie. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda? A motion is carried. Page 6. At this time, we have a green sheet to add to our agenda. First of all, a motion to add the green sheet to our agenda. Casey and Travis, any discussion? All in favor of adding the green sheet? Motion is carried. And now the resolution, be it resolved, the Board of Education, upon a recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and pursuant to education law, accepts the additions. Oh, that was, pardon me. This is to approve the letter of resignation. A motion, please, to approve the letter of resignation. Or did I do that already? I didn't.
You're right.
Who did I do? Who? I didn't?
No, you did it correctly.
Okay.
So the
A
motion is-
motion, please. Travis and Linda, okay, thank you. I got confused there. We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Back to our agenda. Are there any board member requests, comments, or discussion items? I have nomination for BOCES board members. Tina, what do you want me to do with that?
At this time, that's where you're going to decide if there's someone that you'd like to nominate, and then next board meeting, we will approve it in the resolution.
So we're not actually making we're not really nominating.
You're nominating.
Yeah, we're nominating
You're going to
Linda.
nominate who you'd like.
Okay.
And then next board meeting, I'll put it in the resolution, and we'll
I see, okay. So a motion, please. Are there any nominations
Yes,
to BOCES board?
yes. I would like to
Tina?
nominate Linda Egner to serve as a member of the BOCES Board of Education.
All right, is there a second?
I'd like to
Travis?
second that nomination.
Are there any other nominations? Then, all in favor of Linda as a nominee for the board, BOCES board? Motion is carried. Thank
right?
you. And then next meeting, we will have the resolution. Yes. Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion? Any good news that anyone wants to share? All right, then, that completes our agenda. We do need to go into executive session again to discuss the employment history of a specific employee. Motion, please. Leslie and Linda. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We are breaking for executive session. We will be returning to go into public session, but we will not be doing any business. We will simply be adjourning. So anyone is welcome to stay or leave.